start, actually, Harold, with you, because we've got the partial shutdown. There's a lot of negotiating to be done if we can get people to the table. We've got the debt ceiling crisis looming. What are the big questions to ask, the things that really need to be sorted first in Washington?
Well, we could do a 3-day conference on that question alone. The prescience of Skip and Ross and Mike Milken to have us here on October 1, the day of a government shutdown in the U.S. is pretty amazing. I'd say two quick things. I think we're probably in for at least a week to 2 week shutdown of the government, largely because you have the looming questions around the debt ceiling. We all learned that the 16th or the 17th, the Treasury won't be able to cover all of our bills, which could cause some damage to our credit rating. I think you have a group of Republicans in the House and the Senate who would love to cut a deal today with the president, raise the open government back up and raise the debt ceiling and move on to other conversations. Unfortunately, you have a group that's louder, perhaps a little larger in the House, commonly called the Tea Party, which has stood its ground around this Obamacare, around the Affordable Care Act. I think the things to watch for, we were talking a little bit about in the room, I think we may find ourselves in the next week or two where Paul Ryan may say to some 40 to 50 members of the Republican caucus, we cannot allow the debt ceiling to be breached. Let us cut a deal with this White House and figure out ways to allow for health care to come back up a week or two after we get through this moment. If you recall last December when a bill was struck, it was Paul Ryan that played a key role. His voice has been conspicuously absent in this process so far. I think one of the national papers in the U.S. wrote about this in the last day or two. So I see him as one of the key players in all of this.
And you need those players, because one of the things we were just talking about is who are the deal makers? You know, who are the people who command respect from both sides in the way that Ted Kennedy would have done?
No doubt about it. Things happen fast. You think about 12 weeks ago, the American ire was directed in a big way at Vladimir Putin around Ed Snowden, and there was a big infatuation with this issue back in the States. 12 weeks later, he played a key role in helping America not really save the president, some of the rhetoric the president had around a red line in Syria. And if indeed we're able to find an agreement with the Iranians around these nuclear issues, think about it, 12 weeks ago, Putin was looked at in many ways in the U.S. as a great pariah. He could find himself 12 weeks later legitimately in the conversation for the Nobel Peace Prize if we avoid taking military action.
So you're saying the U.S. Congress ought to look at what's been done, take heart from what's been done to Vladimir Putin's reputation?
I'm trying to find positive in
that's
anything.
Good. I like that. I like that.
So I appreciate you amplifying that point. I only make the point. These things happen very fast, and the next 2 weeks will be unfortunately highly interesting to watch.
Okay, Todd Morley, are you fundamentally an optimist here when we look at the way that the political shenanigans are playing out?
Well, that I think is probably the least of it. Obviously, there's not much faith in our elected officials. We have a single-digit rating now, something like that, kind of unheard of. But I think the scarier thing is that my own belief is that we're in kind of the eye of the storm, and that we think we're in kind of an economic recovery, but the fact is that we're in very slow growth, and this is with the Fed stepping on the gas now for many years, and so we keep throwing trillions of dollars at the problem. We've already recreated a housing bubble. We have bubbles now in the stock market and the bond market. And, you know, there's a wonderful movie that just came out called Money for Nothing that everybody should look at. It's a 100-year study of the Fed. And it's just unsustainable. You just can't keep printing money and creating bubbles in hopes that you'll have this trickle down.
But if the Fed had started easing off the taper and we'd got to this point today with the shutdown, wouldn't the uncertainty, the lack of competence be worse?
Well, the problem is there's no adult in the room anymore. And so the Fed's tapering, they're not tapering. You know, we used to look at Mr. Volcker and Greenspan and have a lot of faith. And so now it's unclear kind of who is in charge. And so I think they've sort of put themselves into a bind that'll be tough to get out of, notwithstanding the fact that we've already flooded the market with money.
Okay, perhaps it should have been called US Overview Eye of the Storm, but I'm going to gather contenders, I think, for the most accurate name for this session. Eric, just over to you for first thoughts about where we are now and how much political dysfunction can drag the economy down.
Well, I think if you'd asked me that question 9 months ago, I was, pretty optimistic around where the U.S. market was going, where the economy was going. I mean, we're a pretty good proxy for just about all industries. We're big in energy and healthcare and infrastructure and also industrial and manufacturing. But this year's been pretty flat. The last 2 years we've had 8-9% growth in the U.S. We're largely capital spending tied to major capital. This year's been slow, and particularly for some sectors. But I think a lot of it has been driven by uncertainty. Some of it's been driven by what's been happening with the slowdown in China and also the recession in Europe. So exports are down. We exported about $6 billion last year. We're going to be well below that this year in terms of what we export out of the U.S. But the uncertainty in the last 5 or 6 months has been unbelievable. I mean, we can point to hundreds of billions of dollars of projects that have now been on the drawing board, some for years, but many for months, with companies waiting to see what's going to happen with the budget for this year, what's going to be funded, what's not going to be funded.
Do you look at Congress and want to shake them collectively and think,
I do that occasionally.
I
do that occasionally. It doesn't do much good, but yeah, I think it's very dysfunctional over there. I think a lot of people waiting to see, just basic things like the transportation bill, the R&D tax credit, the energy efficiency bill that was put forward. I mean, there's a lot of these things that companies can't take action, can't make investments until they know whether it's going to be in place or not. So I think that's slowing a lot of things down there.